I saw this illumination that was moving with respect to the stars. We were smart enough to not say, Houston, there's a light out there that's following us. So technically, it becomes an unidentified flying object.
When Buzz Aldrin returned from the moon, he wasn't the same. The mission was called humanity's greatest triumph. But whatever he witnessed up there was not what we initially thought. And he said it changed him forever.
Sometime when we were on the surface of the moon, and I think actually when we were outside, the sort of nebulous thought coming to me.
Now new evidence is backing up his claims and forcing scientists to ask the same question. What did Buzz Aldrin really see on the moon? The moment that shook the world. During a televised interview marking the anniversary of Apollo 11, Buzz Aldrin, the Apollo astronaut who became the second man to walk on the moon, sat across from a reporter answering familiar questions. The lights were bright, the cameras were rolling, and the crew expected another calm story about humanity's first steps on another world. But something unexpected happened. When the reporter asked what the moon means to him after all these years, Aldrin stopped. His hands froze, his eyes filled with tears, and for several seconds he said nothing. Then in a low, uneven voice he whispered, "The moon is not what you think." The reporter hesitated, unsure how to respond. The control room fell silent. For a man who once stood at the center of human achievement, this sudden emotion felt out of place. Aldrin didn't explain or laugh it off. He simply leaned back in his chair and looked away, as if remembering something too heavy to describe. According to those who were present, the mood in the studio changed instantly. The confident hero who once symbolized victory now appeared fragile, shaken, and deeply human. People who have seen Buzz Aldrin speak about the moon in recent years say his emotions often catch them off guard. In some interviews, his voice trembles or his eyes fill with tears when he recalls the landing. Reporters reviewing his past appearances notice that his tone changes each time he speaks about the moon. Sometimes he sounds proud, other times uneasy, as if the memory carries more weight than he lets on. In a 2019 interview, his voice cracked when he described the silence of the lunar surface. Former colleagues said that even in private, he would sometimes pause mid-sentence when talking about the view of Earth from space, as though he was searching for words that never came. Those who know him best describe two sides of Buzz Aldrin. In public, he is disciplined and enthusiastic, always supporting new missions and speaking about the future of space exploration. But in private, he is quieter and often lost in thought, as if a part of him never fully came back from the moon. That brief statement, "The moon is not what you think," left the world guessing. Was it regret, revelation, or warning? No one could tell. But the answer does not lie in that interview. To understand that trembling voice, we must go back to the start, to the mission that pushed him farther than any human had ever gone. Building the impossible. In July 1969, thousands gathered at Kennedy Space Center in Florida as cameras from around the world focused on a single rocket. Reporters filled the press stands, microphones ready, waiting for history to begin. The Saturn V stood 363 feet tall, the most powerful rocket ever built. It wasn't the spacecraft itself, but the launcher designed to send it beyond Earth's pull. At its tip sat Apollo 11 carrying three men, Neil Armstrong, Michael Collins, and Buzz Aldrin, on a journey to a place no human had ever reached. Apollo 11 was not built on dreams or luck. It was the result of years of testing, planning, and risk. More than 400,000 engineers, technicians, and scientists had worked to bring it to life. Every bolt, circuit, and control switch had been examined repeatedly. A single fault could destroy the rocket and the men inside. Everyone who worked on the program understood that success and disaster were separated by fractions of a second. On the morning of July 16, the astronauts arrived at Launch Complex 39A. They wore white pressure suits and helmets and gave a quick wave to the cameras before stepping into the elevator that would take them to the top of the rocket. Inside the command module, They strapped into narrow seats, surrounded by switches, screens, and wires. For 2 hours, they sat strapped in while technicians completed final checks and fuel lines hissed beneath them. The world counted down along with them. At 9:32 a.m., the engines fired. The ground trembled and flames burst from the base of the rocket. The noise was so powerful that it shook buildings miles away. The rocket began to climb slowly, then gathered speed until it disappeared from view. Then the roar faded, and control of the mission transferred fully to space. Apollo 11 was on its way. Inside the spacecraft, the violent shaking gave way to near silence except for the hum of the life support systems. The crew watched as the first stage separated cleanly, then the second. The S-4B stage ignited and pushed them faster until the spacecraft reached a speed of about 24,000 miles per hour. In Houston, controllers tracked every second through telemetry data while the astronauts called out system checks. A single mistake could still end everything. According to mission reports, Aldrin's heart rate stayed calm as the spacecraft broke free of Earth's gravity. For 3 days, they traveled through open space toward the moon. Outside their window, Earth grew smaller until it looked like a bright marble. The moon grew larger with each passing hour. The journey was long and tense, but every reading showed that the mission was holding steady. The world watched and waited for confirmation that they were about to make history. After 76 hours, Apollo 11 entered lunar orbit. The crew looked out and saw the moon fill the window in front of them. They had reached their destination. The next stage would be the most dangerous part of all. They had to land. Every calculation, every hour of training, and every risk would now be tested in the descent to the surface. Silence before the first step. When Apollo 11 reached the far side of the moon, radio contact with Earth went dead. For a few minutes, the 3 men inside the spacecraft were completely alone. No signals, no voices, no heartbeat from mission control. It was the first time in human history that anyone had been that far from every other living soul. According to mission transcripts, even the constant chatter inside the cabin went quiet. The crew knew that if something happened during those minutes, no one on Earth could help them. When communication returned, mission control heard the calm, steady voices of the astronauts. The next phase was about to begin. Armstrong and Aldrin moved into the lunar module, known as Eagle. Collins remained behind in the command module, orbiting alone while the other two prepared for descent. According to reports, the separation between the two spacecraft went smoothly. As the Eagle began its powered descent, computer alarms started to sound. The onboard system was overloaded, flashing a series of warning codes that no one expected. Engineers on Earth worked frantically to confirm that the mission could continue. Inside the cabin, Armstrong took manual control to guide the descent. Aldrin called out the altitude and speed with mechanical precision. Fuel was running low. If the engine cut off too soon, they would crash. Everyone listening in Houston could hear their breathing over the radio. With less than 30 seconds of fuel left, Armstrong found a clear spot and leveled the lander. Then his calm voice came through the static. "Houston Tranquility Base here. The Eagle has landed." The room at Mission Control erupted. Engineers clapped, shouted, and cried. Around the world, television networks broke into live coverage, and millions cheered. But inside the lunar module, things were different. The two men looked out the small window at the gray surface below them. No sound, no wind, no motion. Just a still landscape stretching to the horizon. According to several reports, Armstrong and Aldrin sat in silence for a while before beginning their post-landing checklist. Aldrin later described the feeling as both thrilling and strange, as if they had arrived somewhere that did not belong to anyone. Before they stepped outside, Aldrin made a quiet request to Mission Control. He wanted a few minutes for a personal ceremony. He reached into his flight bag, took out a small communion kit prepared by his church, poured a few drops of wine into a chalice, and said a brief prayer. That small moment went largely unnoticed at the time, but it marked a unique event in history. It was the first religious ceremony ever performed on another world. According to Aldrin, he wanted to give thanks in a way that felt personal and human before doing something that no one had done before. The next step would make history, but it would also confront Aldrin with something far stranger than science: the haunting stillness of a world untouched by life. Magnificent desolation. When Buzz Aldrin stepped down the ladder of the lunar module, he expected the view to take his breath away. Instead, what greeted him was emptiness. The surface was gray and flat, covered in fine dust that clung to everything. There was no sound, no air, no movement. The horizon looked close, almost unnaturally so, and for a moment it gave him the strange sensation that he was standing inside a giant bowl rather than on a world. The sight was not beautiful in the way people imagined. It was harsh, colorless, and unsettling. Aldrin's boots pressed into the dust, leaving crisp footprints that would likely stay there for centuries. He moved slowly, testing the surface while Armstrong set up the camera and flag. Through his headset, the voices from Houston sounded distant and thin, as if they were coming from another lifetime. According to mission logs, Aldrin commented quietly to himself about the strange texture of the soil and the sharpness of the shadows. The sunlight, unfiltered by any atmosphere, was painfully bright, but the sky above was absolute black. There were no stars, only darkness stretching forever. When Armstrong joined him on the surface, the two men began setting up the equipment for experiments and photography. Each movement required care. Every step raised dust that fell straight back to the ground without floating. The lack of wind made everything look frozen in place, as though time itself had stopped. Even their own voices, heard through the radio, sounded metallic and hollow. The moon, Aldrin later said, felt more like a place outside creation than another planet. It was during those first few minutes that Aldrin said the words that would follow him for the rest of his life. Magnificent desolation. The phrase captured everything he was feeling: astonishment mixed with deep loneliness. The landscape was magnificent in scale, yet completely lifeless. He realized he was standing somewhere untouched by any form of life, a place that existed unchanged for billions of years. Every footprint he left felt intrusive, like disturbing a world that had been silent since the beginning of time. When he looked up at Earth hanging far away in the black sky, Aldrin saw it glowing blue and white against the void. It was small and fragile, almost delicate. According to interviews years later, that sight changed how he viewed everything. From that distance, all of humanity fit inside a single shining sphere. The borders, the conflicts, the noise of civilization, all of it vanished into a quiet dot. He later said that in that moment, he understood that exploration was not just about reaching new places. It was about facing the reality of how small and temporary we truly are. But even as the world celebrated, that silence, that vast, merciless stillness, followed him home, and it refused to leave. The weight that never lifted. When the Apollo 11 crew returned to Earth, they were welcomed as heroes. Parades stretched for miles through New York and Chicago. Flags waved, crowds cheered, and television cameras followed their every move. Buzz Aldrin smiled and waved from the back of an open car, his silver astronaut suit shining under the summer sun. On the surface, he looked proud. Inside, he was still standing on that silent world. The noise of the crowd could not replace the emptiness he had left behind. In the weeks after the mission, Aldrin went through the ceremonies that every national hero faces. He met presidents, gave speeches, and received medals. He shook hands with scientists, generals, and children who wanted to be astronauts. But according to people who knew him then, something about him had changed. During interviews, his answers became shorter. During parties, he often stood quietly in corners, staring off at nothing. Some friends said they would find him sitting alone late at night, deep in thought, as if he was still somewhere far away. According to reports from colleagues, even in professional settings, Aldrin sometimes seemed detached. While Armstrong and Collins handled the press with ease, Aldrin often appeared restless. He was polite but distant, his mind wandering during conversations. A few of his close friends later said they believed he was haunted not by what he saw, but by what he understood. The moon had stripped away the distractions of life. When he came home, the ordinary world felt unreal. Fame only made that feeling worse. Everyone wanted him to describe what the moon was like, but he could never find the right words. He once said that explaining it to people felt impossible because no one could understand the silence. To many, it was a place of glory. To him, it was a reminder of how small humanity really was. He later told a reporter, "It's hard to come back to grocery stores and traffic lights after you've seen infinity." The world had celebrated his journey, but he was struggling to live in it again. Over the next few years, Aldrin battled depression and what he later described as a sense of loss. The mission had ended, but the silence had followed him home. According to several accounts, he spent many nights awake, replaying the landing in his mind. Friends said that sometimes his eyes would drift to the sky, as if searching for something he left behind. They saw two sides of him: the engineer who still believed in science, and the philosopher who could not stop questioning it. In later interviews, Aldrin admitted that he never really left the moon. He said, "It's always with you, somewhere behind your eyes." That feeling, the one that broke him for years, is the same one that made him whisper those 6 words decades later. "The moon is not what you think." For years, those words were dismissed as metaphor, until science began uncovering evidence that proved Aldrin may have been right. The revelation: the moon is not what you think. More than 50 years after Apollo 11, scientists began to look at the moon again. This time, they weren't using rockets or astronauts. They were using computers, satellites, and artificial intelligence. The old measurements, photos, and rock samples from the Apollo era were rescanned and analyzed by powerful software. What the machines found made scientists question almost everything they thought they knew. And in an unexpected way, it confirmed what Buzz Aldrin had felt the day he stood on that gray surface. One of the first surprises came from instruments the Apollo crews left behind. In the 1970s, seismometers recorded tiny moonquakes caused by meteoroid impacts. When researchers re-examined that data years later, they noticed something odd. Each time the moon was hit, the vibrations didn't fade quickly like they would on Earth. They echoed for almost an hour. NASA engineers described it as ringing like a bell. That strange behavior suggested the moon's interior wasn't solid like Earth's. It might be layered in a way that makes sound travel differently, or even partly hollow. Whatever the explanation, it was clear that the moon's structure was far more unusual than anyone expected. Then came the discovery that linked the moon directly to Earth. Using new isotope analysis tools, scientists compared the chemical makeup of lunar rocks with material from deep inside Earth. The match was nearly perfect. This meant the moon wasn't captured from space. It was born from Earth itself. Billions of years ago, a massive collision likely tore a chunk of our planet into orbit, and that debris became the moon. It isn't a stranger circling us, it's family. As technology advanced, new robotic missions began scanning the surface again. India's Chandrayaan-3 lander and NASA's Lunar Reconnaissance Orbiter used radar and spectrometers to search beneath the soil. They found tiny glass beads formed by ancient volcanic activity. Inside those beads were traces of water, sealed away for billions of years. Scientists believe these came from deep within the moon, hinting that its interior still holds chemical energy, evidence that it was once an active, changing world. In 2023, artificial intelligence helped analyze old Apollo data in new ways. Algorithms picked up faint magnetic patterns inside lunar rocks, proving the moon once had a molten core that generated its own magnetic field. It had a heart that once beat, just like Earth's. and radar scans of the far side revealed buried metal masses the size of mountains, remnants perhaps of asteroids that struck long before life began on Earth. All these discoveries reshaped how we see the Moon. It is not a dead, silent rock drifting in space. It is a dynamic piece of our planet's story, half of a broken whole that still reflects who we are. Buzz Aldrin seemed to understand that before the data existed. When he said, "The Moon is not what you think," he wasn't making a riddle. He was describing a truth that science has only now begun to understand. The Moon is not separate from us. It is us. All these discoveries changed how scientists understand the Moon. It is no longer seen as a dead rock floating around Earth. The new evidence shows it was once alive with heat, movement, and activity, and that it shares the same origins as our own planet. Buzz Aldrin seemed to sense that long before the data proved it. When he said, "The Moon is not what you think," he wasn't being mysterious. He was describing a simple truth. The Moon and Earth are connected. What happens to one has always shaped the other. The legacy of the tears, what the Moon taught us. As one of the last surviving Apollo astronauts, Aldrin used his platform to change how people thought about exploration. He encouraged new generations of astronauts to prepare not only their equipment, but their minds. He warned that space could test a person's sense of meaning as much as their skill. His honesty about the emotional toll of returning to Earth after such a journey helped NASA create new psychological programs for astronauts on long missions. For the first time, the agency began to study not only how humans survive in space, but how they cope when they come home. Aldrin also became a strong voice for cooperation beyond borders. He believed the Moon should never belong to one flag or nation. In his speeches, he called it the common ground of the universe, a place that reminded humanity of what it could achieve together. He publicly supported NASA's Artemis program and international efforts to build a permanent base on the Moon. To him, the next era of exploration was not about competition, but unity. Outside science, his reflections reached classrooms and museums around the world. Teachers quoted his words to inspire students to think beyond technology, to see discovery as a moral responsibility. Artists, filmmakers, and writers drew from his phrase, "magnificent desolation," to express the beauty and loneliness of human achievement. Through Aldrin, the story of Apollo became more than history. It became philosophy. In his final years, Aldrin often said the greatest lesson of the Moon was about Earth itself. From space, he saw how fragile our planet looked, small, bright, and alone. He reminded people that exploration should make us better caretakers of the world we already have. His tears were not about sadness, they were a warning, a reminder, and a hope. Buzz Aldrin showed that the Moon was never just about reaching the stars. It was about learning what it means to be human. What do you think Buzz Aldrin really saw on the Moon? And why has it haunted him ever since? Tell us what you think in the comments. Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.